Welcome to the enLIGHTenUP podcast. I'm Lisa Watson and will be joined by my co-host Nicole Frolick and Brian Koenigberg. The enLIGHTenUP podcast is a weekly show that provides an unconventional and refreshing spin on spirituality, where three friends and weekly guests share informative, fun, and usually off-the-wall conversations. Unlike others, we provide fringe and skeptical viewpoints on all topics, because our experience has taught us that the echo chamber is a boring place from which to learn. So regardless of where you are in your spiritual journey, we can promise you're going to find a place to fit in here. So we invite you to grab a drink and listen in on our casual, entertaining, and hopefully enlightening conversation. And enLIGHTenUP is a self-funded podcast, so if you would like to help us to continue to be able to produce, enhance, and expand the show for our audience, then please send your support using the link in the show notes, or go to our website, enlightenup.us, and check out our merchandise shop, where you can purchase merchandise that will allow you to express some spiritual humor. You may also show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes and following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you all so much for listening and supporting us, and now let's jump right into the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the enLIGHTenUP podcast. I am Nicole Frolick, one of your co-hosts, and I am also joined by Lisa Watson and Brian Koenigberg. And today we are excited to have not one, but two fantastic guests joining the conversation today. What if your loved ones could send letters from the afterlife, helping you to live a life free from fear while tapping into an abundance of peace and love? Beth Mund and Berit connect with people who have passed, and in 2016, they discovered that not only could they connect around the same spirit, but together they could transcribe messages from loved ones and strangers in the form of sacred letters. Their combined psychic and intuitive abilities opened a portal through which spiritual communication flows smoothly and rapidly, and their new book, Living Beyond Fear, Sacred Letters from the Afterlife, includes 21 contemporary letters that are inspiring, empowering, and healing. Ladies, welcome to the podcast. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Nicole.
So, Beth, why don't we start with you? Do you want to share with our audience just a little bit about yourself and what you were doing? Have you ladies known each other your entire life, or when did you guys meet?
No, we just met in 2016. So this all came about very quickly. I was having a spiritual group, a group of women with another medium over our house, and we were doing monthly just talks and engaging and meditations. And someone that I knew bought Berit over, and that was in 2016. And we started talking and connecting and text messaging, and that we'll talk a little bit about how we ended up realizing we could connect with the same spirit, but we did meet through a mutual friend. And then when we were, deciding, when the group had ended, we kept our connection, we kept our text messaging, and then we started to realize the power of what was happening, and we were getting intuitions and messages, and then these letters started streaming through, and that's like the overall way it all kind of.
And has mediumship always been something you were aware of your entire life, or did it turn on at a certain point?
For me, it turned on. I've always been intuitive, and my whole life I received intuitive. I call them intuitive hits. I just never knew it, and I never paid attention to it. You know, that old thing where, you get the message, don't go this way, go that way. And you're like, okay, whatever. And then you realize, oh yeah, like there's a whole bunch of traffic that way, or, whatever. That there was one time when I remember I was it was about 5 years ago. I was just getting on to intuition and learning about it. I did a lot of spiritual work, and I heard, don't put the glass on the floor. I had a glass of water that I brought into my bedroom, and I laid down and I heard, don't put the glass on the floor. And I was like, don't put the glass on the floor. And I was like, okay, whatever. I just did it. I put it on the floor. I didn't listen. Sure enough, I woke up at 2 a.m. I had to go to the bathroom, and I kicked the glass, and the water went all over the floor. It sounds so simple, but that was an aha moment for me that, yes, your intuition is telling you something, whether it's your higher self or your guides, or there's information that comes through, and some of it is profound and some of it is, day to day. So when Berit and I started connecting, I have also been a writer for many, many years, and these messages and the connections, the automatic writing had been finding its way into my writing. I just didn't know it. And it took me to connect with Berit for her to put two and two together, that I was receiving from the other side. I wasn't aware of it, but I had been receiving for much of my life. I didn't realize it. And what's interesting is, like, it was about 2 years ago when we started writing these letters. I started thinking about how does this happen? Why is this happening to me? Like, how can I do this? And I've done a lot of soul searching, a lot of work on myself. And for me personally, I had experienced abuse as a child and trauma, and I disassociated during those moments. And I always knew that, but it came to me within an intuition. I was driving, that is when I went to the other side. And that is when I first started connecting, but I didn't understand it, and I didn't realize it until much later, until Berit and I started working together. So
that seems like a really common theme that we found through guests on our show that have experienced some form of abuse as a child, that their intuitive gifts are what allowed them to escape, or kind of allowed them, like you said, to dissociate from that reality.
Yes.
And kind of like cope with what was going on.
Yes, I was always in my head, or I was off somewhere, or, I had invisible friends, but they were probably people from the other side. But yeah, I've heard that as well. And I think it gave me a way to escape, but it also, allowed me, when it came back so many years later, to believe it and to know it was the truth, and know that this didn't just appear out of nowhere for me. It didn't. And so it's been an amazing journey since Berit and I met, because everything's just come together for me. It makes all sense.
And Berit, how about you? How did everything start for you before you met Beth?
So for me, sometimes when I was younger, I would actually see people years ago, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's just my imagination. Or right before I went to bed, I would have spirits come to my bedside right before I was to fall asleep and give me messages that I wouldn't know anything about. But if they were so insistent, I got out of bed, I texted a friend, said, your mother-in-law is here. And the message didn't mean a lot to me, but had a profound effect and meaning for the person I was delivering the message to. So in 2010, a lot opened for me. I actually shut down with multiple sclerosis and lost my ability to walk. And I was a mother of twins who were 6th graders at the time. And it put me in such a still position, and so much started to come through. Even though I wasn't physically mobile, spiritually, I became aware of so much more around me. It was so palpable. And I read Many Minds, Many Masters, and a few different books that people had given to me while I was in bed. And over time and with therapy, I regained my ability to walk again. And then in 2012, I had another big shift. My daughter, Sarah, who was an 8th grader at the time, was diagnosed with a very rare cancer. And I felt, again, this huge awakening in me and great strength, even though we went through, it was very painful, and it was scary, and all that challenge and that adversity. She's now is good. She's in remission, and she's a senior in college now. And then in 2016, I met Beth, and we realized that we could combine our different abilities, and we're sort of the missing piece for each other. I was sort of like the scout that can identify people that were coming into my awareness, and she was the transcriber who could actually start hearing these different letters. But for me, it was kind of an unfolding from 2010 to 2016 when I really started opening up.
Oh, wow. And so when you finally met Beth, what was the first experience like for you guys when someone came through? Like, who was it?
So I think our aha moment, so we had met at this class and we were expanding our own awareness and trying to make sense of things that we didn't understand. But someone had asked us to connect around a person that neither of us knew. And I remember sitting in Beth's living room. I was on one side of the room and she was on the other, and we both had our notebooks. We weren't talking with each other. And we were just copying down for probably like a half an hour everything that we were hearing. I hear in my left ear, on my left side, everything seems to be on my left side. But after half an hour, we compared our notes and we were stunned. They were eerily similar, even though we had no common thread between the two of us about the individual. And that was like our aha moment. So we thought, oh, if we combine our intuitive abilities, we'll just get more information. But what happened actually is when we combined our intuitive abilities, we started getting full letters. I'm trying to remember some of the first ones that started coming through. Again, we didn't understand what the magnitude of it all, but I would connect with somebody on the left side. Again, I kind of see them on a visual stage as if they're waiting in the wings. And when a letter's to come forward, I can actually see the spirit move center stage. And I know, even though I'm not with Beth, because we're not physically together, we're in neighboring towns, we do a lot of text messaging between ourselves, I can see them move center stage, and then a letter actually flows through Beth in like sheer minutes, 7 pages in maybe 8 minutes. She's like a court stenographer, just
Wow.
quickly typing away in an automatic writing, no consciousness. Even now, it's like, oh my gosh, this letter, we talk about a letter. She's like, oh, I don't remember that letter. I mean, she's not even conscious of what she's doing. But when we pass the letter to whoever it's intended to, it has great meaning, not only for the individual who's receiving it, but for all of us. So the letters have a universal underlying message of love, of healing, of compassion, of empowerment. And they speak, each spirit is very distinct, and each one speaks to a specific theme, if you will, for how to live our life more fully and abundantly and purposefully. Because we're all spiritual entities, we're all spiritual beings, even that we're, a soul in a body, not a body with a soul.
Can you give us an example of a letter that you've received?
Oh, we have so many. So go ahead,
I
Beth.
just want to real quickly add to what Berit had said. I have come to understand that there are absolutely no accidents. There are no accidents, no coincidences. And we started text messaging back and forth. We, like Berit said, we weren't together in the same room. And it was the fact that we were text messaging that led us to these letters, because there was one day where we were just, we were opening up spiritually, talking about different spiritual concepts. And I started to feel that there was something coming through for Berit that was important. And I remember typing, there's something that, it's important coming through to you. And she was like, oh, okay. And I said, no, really, like, this is something that's really important. You're supposed to listen to this. And it wasn't me. Like, I didn't feel like that's the way I spoke. And then when I started texting, she said, you don't, I just realized that there were times when we're texting and your tone completely changes and the type of wording completely changes. And I don't know if we would have been aware of that had we been speaking about all this in person. And that's when we started to get on that these letters were starting to come through, because it was right there in front of us in writing.
So I think I also want to just stress that it's not just people who have passed that we are connecting with. We're connecting with angel beings. We're connecting with one of the letters that we included in this first book is actually my dog Summer, who has now passed, but she actually channeled a letter through Beth when we were out walking in the woods. I mean, we connected and Beth could hear her, and then a letter came later speaking to how she actually, two things. One, how animals, we share a space with animals, and how healing, and we all know our animals are so full of unconditional love, but they're full of healing, and they as many times take on what is going on in a household. They absorb that energy. And this was the case for Summer. She was speaking while she was still alive, how she was absorbing my daughter's cancer. My daughter had a rare cancer, only 25 kids in the world get it. And she healed from that, which is amazing. I mean, each person has their own journey, but Summer spoke to absorbing that cancer, and Summer did pass from that cancer. So it's interesting, not only, again, that we're connecting with animals, we're connecting with angels. One of the things that Beth was just speaking about, that was she was texting, was a letter that came through from Archangel Gabriel to me in that texting, which Beth is a profound writer, but Archangel Gabriel, her words are amazing. And it was a direct message to allow everything to unfold. You know, I think she spoke about what will unfold you cannot imagine, but you must try, for we are all we see and know, and to expand into that greater awareness. I think all of these letters, whether it's coming from someone who passed or an angel or even a dog, they're all speaking to insight into an expanded realm. What we've come to kind of, in our little glimpse of the afterlife, to see from talking to so many people in so many different situations, is that we shed our earthly form and we move with our same consciousness goes with us. Our consciousness goes into this realm where we are not in a body. And it's that progression. We're progressing here as spiritual beings, but we're also still progressing there. And many of these letters are reading almost like cliff notes of how to connect, how to live in this life. They're sharing with us their insight from a much more expanded realm. They don't know everything, but they can see a much more wider perspective, a bigger vantage point. And they're, with great love and compassion, and each of their own personalities coming through, they're gifting us back that insight to move us beyond fear and doubt, the things that keep us limited. You asked about, Brian, one of the letters that was so profound. They're all profound, but one of the letters that we did include in this book, besides Summers when she was living, was a woman named Mariana. And Mariana had not passed. She was in a coma. I hear in the morning in my left ear, I hear guidance from beings or guides or angels. And one morning, on a Monday morning, I heard that I could connect with someone who had, Beth and I could connect with people who are in comas. And I thought, that's so interesting. I didn't know anyone in a coma, and I asked Beth, and she didn't know anyone in a coma. 2 weeks later, I was alerted about a woman who on that Monday before had a brain aneurysm and gone into a coma. And when I thought of her, I could hear her in my left ear saying, yes, yes, you remember me. I barely knew her, but she's like, yes, yes, you remember me. And so I text Beth and said, Beth, I can hear Mariana. I know that we are connecting with her. And sure enough, within that day, this profound several-page letter came through about our consciousness. And hers is interesting because she speaks about how our mind, we've studied the brain so much, but it's our mind that we're just starting to understand. And it's our consciousness, that our consciousness, she says, can go anywhere at any time with anyone. And that can happen in this realm as much as it happens in the afterlife. The difference between this realm and the afterlife is that we live in a duality here. We live in a heavier realm. We live, we give our energy to fear and to doubt that keeps us limited and weighed down. Whereas in the afterlife, it is, a thought is immediate and things happen, there is no time. So that there is so much to be shared between the two realms of helping us both collectively progress. We're helping them and they're helping us because we're all one. We're so interconnected beyond our imagination. We are so one with one another. So that's just one example of a letter from someone who is now, she's come out of her coma. She was telling me when I first connected, tell my children I am not dying. The doctors didn't give her a great prognosis and it didn't look so hopeful, but she actually has come out of her coma. Her short-term memory isn't the best, but she's walking and eating, and she has not passed. But she was speaking to healing, which she underwent in that coma was healing across 100 years or lifetimes it would take. I don't know what she was healing, but she was speaking to healing and kept saying, tell my children I am not dying. So it was a profound letter, and it was so much so that this is one of the 21 letters that we put in this first collection. We had so many that it was hard to sort through which ones to include.
Do you always know who the letter is from? Do they sign it when they're done?
They do, but actually, go ahead, Beth.
Yeah. Sometimes it's obvious right away, and sometimes it takes some time for us to understand who it is. One letter that came through was from a woman named Deborah, and I was laying in bed. It was about 11:30 at night, and I heard a train whistle in my living room, and I thought I was hearing things, and I went to the living room and I checked. There was no kids' toys that could ever sound that loud. You second guess yourself. You're like, what is going on? And I heard it twice. And then I called my husband. I said, okay, I don't know what's going on. I'm going crazy. I think you need to come home. He's like, what? I'm out with my friends. I said, well, just come home. So he came home, and of course it didn't happen again. But then the next night, it was around midnight, and it happened, and he heard it. So I was like, okay, yes, I'm not going crazy. He heard it too. And it happened twice again. And it was loud. I mean, it sounded like the train was running through my living room, and I live nowhere near a train station. And I remember texting Berit and said, I don't know what's going on. This is so strange. And then all of a sudden, my intuition kicked in. I had a college roommate who passed from an Amtrak accident. It was going from Philadelphia to New York, and it was within the last few years. And we both knew instantly that this was her trying to get our attention, my attention, and that the letter was going to come through about it. And then it did. And it sounds so crazy and so far-fetched, but I lived it, I experienced it. So I know it's the truth. And very often these letters that do come through, we know it's the truth. And then sometimes within the letters, we receive information about the soul who has passed, or about the person or people who the letter is for. And we've gotten confirmation from people who we've shared the letters with. And our book is actually laid out in 3 different sections. We have an introduction, which talks about how the letters came to us, and then we have the letter, and then not all of them, but many of them, we include a reflection. So if we got feedback from a letter, or we have things that happened after the letter came through, we write that in the reflection. So there were people that we were able to share the letters with and get their feedback. So they don't sign it per se, but we receive information that helps us.
Have you ever received any information that was lost in the reality, where it would help family members put things together to help them move on, that they didn't get at the time?
I know for me, I had someone that came to me whose father had passed, and her mother was struggling a lot. They had been together for 60 years, and he had recently passed. And I said, I'm seeing him in a band. I don't know if that makes any sense. And she's like, no, he didn't play an instrument. And then what happens to me is I need to widen the area that I can see through an image, or ask for more information. And then I realized it was a jazz band. And then I started hearing. So usually it's an image that will come to me, or I hear, those will come in together with each other. So then I began to hear the song When the Saints Come Marching In. And I said to her, okay, so now it all opened up for me. I'm hearing the song. And she said that was his favorite song. And then I received the message. So I usually receive a bit of information that says it is who it is for them. And then she was crying in appreciation. I said, but listen to his message. His message is that it's okay to grieve. Like, her mother was trying to be so strong about it. And he was saying, like, so one was that, yes, I'm here. And the other was, you know, that I didn't die, I'm still here. But it's okay to grieve because you're still there. You're still in the physical world. And that was very healing. So I find that, and we also, another thing's coming to mind, we did a reading for someone. We also do readings for people, and we do it through, the same way that we connect for our book, and the sacred letter will come through. But we were hearing a lot of information around a funeral, and it was this woman's father that was coming through, and we we let her know that he was aware there was, and then it turned out there was all this difficulty and conflict that was around his death, and the family members were fighting with each other. And we said to her, he's aware of it, and he's asking for forgiveness, not for him, but for everybody to forgive each other. So, I think that we have found from doing the readings and the letters that what comes through is always healing. And some people might get it right away, and some people over time it sinks in. But what's healing is for them to know that their loved ones are still here, very much still here, even if we can't see them. And then the messages that come through have been healing.
And again, for all of us, I just want to add one more thing from Brian's question. Do we always know who the person is? So I'm just going to give you an example of two of the letters that are in this first collection. One, my niece had asked me to connect with a young woman who was the first year out of high school and who was trekking through Nepal, and she was lost in 2015 during that earthquake. And immediately I felt her, and first of all, I get the personality. Beth and I get images and symbols, and we hear things, we hear songs, or I even hear scripture, and I don't even think I know all my scriptures, but we get all kinds of pieces of things. And I connected with Sydney, and I was texting Beth back and forth, and I said to her, I'm connecting with Sydney, and Beth said to me, well, who is this woman with this, blonde braid? And then I can see exactly who she's seeing. It's almost like we could do a police sketch if we, connected together. And I said, no, I see her on my left side. No, that woman's like looks like in her mid-60s. No, I'm not talking to her. I'm talking to this young girl, Sydney. And every time I connected with Sydney, this other woman came through, and actually she is the one who went center stage, and she channeled this letter. So Beth and I had no idea who this woman was, and her letter was profound. It speaks about the body. It speaks about passing, how we pass one, two, and there's twos, or in a group. So we wanted to get permission to put it in the book. We only used the person's first name, but I wanted to get it to the family. But again, we had no idea who the woman was. So when I asked her, like, who are you? I was given the stanza, the dawning of the age of Aquarius. It kept looping around. And then I was given images of Maine. And I've been to Maine since I was a child. So I'm like, oh yes, this is Maine. And it kept going on and on to the point where I said to Beth, the only connection is those two images, and that every time we connect with Sydney, who passed in this Nepal earthquake, we get this woman. So I went on Google, and I Googled, did someone from Maine pass? Well, sure enough, there was a woman who passed. She was from Maine. What was remarkable was the article that was in the Maine local paper had her picture of someone who had taken it a few days before she passed. And it was exactly like how Beth and I saw her.
Wow.
And she was standing with her silhouette against the jagged rocks of the Nepal cold mountainside. And she had her long blonde braid, and her name was Dawn. So the dawning of the age of Aquarius. We're given different things to try and piece it together. So we actually did make contact with her family and shared the letter, and we said we honor if you want to have it included or not, because we also include a brief introduction before each of the chapters. Before each sacred letter, we've written briefly, what were the circumstances that brought that individual into our awareness? So it introduces that letter and that spirit. And they were said, this is our mother. She, like, it resonates. And so we were able, with her help, because we can ask them and they can give us information. Of course, we need to kind of piece it together. Sometimes we're a little like Laverne Shirley, trying to put our pieces together. But we were able to find her, which is remarkable. And her letter is just beautiful, as is Sydney's, the young girl who also passed with Dawn in that 2015 earthquake, speaks about Mother Earth. Again, we included that because we're all so concerned about our Earth, about what's going on. There's so much more, there's more fires, there's more earthquakes, there's so much happening with our Earth. And she speaks in her beautiful letter about giving voice to the Earth, how, again, just like we as souls and humans, we're so connected as one. We are so connected to our Earth. We're so connected to our animal species. We're all one. We're all so interchanged and interdependent, and can lift each other, and we can heal each other. Like, we can heal ourselves, we can heal our Earth. And it's a very beautifully written, profound letter. Again, each person has their own signature style. They're, as Beth kind of touched on earlier, each one is very distinct. They're, some are much more philosophical, some are just very simple and plain. Some are just, in their simplicity, are beautiful. There's one from Grandma Ruth, which is in this letter, and it talks about living beyond fear, how we don't need to give it that energy, because where we put our energy goes our attention, our thought, our energy follows. And how when we just stop feeding that animal, we acknowledge it and just release it, it can't exist without our energy. So hers is a beautiful letter too, Grandma Ruth's.
Is it easier for you both to connect with a specific person that somebody asks you to try to connect with, or is it completely random?
I think everything, actually, even if we think it's a coincidence, as Beth said, nothing is a coincidence. So much is being guided to us, even if we aren't even totally aware of it in a human way. The first letter that we included in this book is from Peter. I lost two cousins in 2017. Peter passed from a drug overdose, and he is the one who kind of made sense for Beth and I about what is going on. He spoke about how he stepped forward to deliver this letter, what these sacred letters are all about, and then the next person will be coming through. So even though we go about our daily lives, we are really much more guided. When we listen to our intuition, we go to where we kind of need to go, and things unfold. For example, I went to the grocery store to get berries. I don't need berries. I have berries in my refrigerator, but I did. I went to the grocery store. So much happens in the produce section of my grocery store from connecting with individuals. And a woman came to me and said, who I did not know. And she said, I've heard you have this gift. And she wanted to connect with her husband who had passed. And we're standing next to the avocados and the berries. And I said to her, I felt her mother, and then I felt her husband. And then within that day, when I shared it with Beth, a letter came through from Frank about grief. I think so much of it, when we listen and when we are quiet and still, and we just are our truth, all of us, every one of us has gifts that we can listen to, that we can follow that intuition, that we can follow that inspiration. And it brings us on the path of where things unfold that we could never have imagined, but are so real, that are more real than sometimes things that we see around us.
I think, Brian, for me, it was easy. It's easier for me to connect with someone I don't know, because, the first struggle for me with this whole thing was overcoming the belief that this, I can do this. And once I had enough information and evidence that, yes, I can do this, there's always that little, thing of doubt that can creep into your mind. And so if I didn't know the person, it felt much stronger than I knew, because I'm always making sure I'm doing the right thing. So if I know someone, I question, oh, am I using this information to help me connect? And so when it's a complete stranger, it's not that I'm not getting the information about someone I know, but when it's a complete stranger, I know nothing about them. And then the information feels really true. And how would I know all this? How would I get this information? Because I don't know anything about them.
Do you guys, have you ever experienced or received any information of the journey of passing, what a soul experiences as they're transitioning?
I think in different ways we have. So, first of all, everyone is surrounded by love. I know we hear this all the time, but it's the truth of what I've experienced, and I think what Beths has experienced. We're always surrounded by unconditional love. So no matter how we pass, in whatever the situation is, we are always with others, and we are always surrounded by great love. And there's no judgment, but the judgment comes from what we've received from talking with people is when they cross over, they almost do like over time, although there is no time, they will do almost like a life review. And it's really in that life review that they are reflecting on the good and the bad, I guess, if you will, of how their actions and their thoughts had a ripple effect with those that they touched consciously and actually subconsciously. But again, it's all for great love. There's a continuum. It doesn't end. And you're in this spiritual consciousness of being progressing, you're healing. We've seen some people have gone into what we call like healing, I guess they call them healing centers. They move in to restore their soul and heal. But they're always surrounded by love and compassion and understanding and progress. We're all working to become that, to return to that wholeness. We've always been whole, but we forget it. In our earthly lives, we forget how worthy, how loved, and how whole we are. But we're nothing further from the truth of not being whole, not being worthy, not being loved. That is our essence of who we are.
And I've never had anything come through specifically about the transition process, but I do, I receive a lot of information from people who are on the other side, and some of it surprised me. One of the things I remember, someone's mother had come through and she didn't feel very loving to me. And I thought, oh, and I didn't know this person's relationship. I saw her, I do see a lot of classrooms, on the other side. So I believe people are in classrooms. And I said, I'm just telling you, I'm seeing your mother standing outside the classroom. She is not going in. She's smoking a cigarette and she's just hanging out there. And she started laughing. She said, well, she did smoke. And she was very narcissistic and very self-centered and wasn't that kind of a person. So I said, she's the same way right now. So I believe we have free choice to heal. It's open to everyone, but I have definitely had a few letters that have come through that surprised me that weren't that loving, as some of the other letters. And Berit and I talked about it, and we do feel there's going to be more books coming through, and we're going to be, the letters were all loving in the first book, but some of the letters that we've gotten, we're going to include in the next books that really showed their personality. Not that, the messages were were great, but they showed their personality that they had here. And so I believe we have free choice, and we can heal or not heal.
That's interesting. And I think that is important to always keep in mind, that just because you pass to the other side doesn't mean you're instantly like some form of angel.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
I don't
Enlightened.
believe it works like that at all.
Yeah.
From my experience. You know, and even I remember my grandfather had come through, and we did not have a great relationship, and he was not a kind person. And he came through and he said, you know, forgive me. You know, he said, forgive me. And I thought, that's my choice. You know, I want to forgive you. He was still acting the same way. It was all about him. He wanted me to forgive him. And in fact, what was interesting is he felt like he was in a sort of hell where he is. I don't believe in hell. From what I've been shown, there is no hell, but we can create our own hell. And he felt like he was in hell because he hurt so many people and he couldn't tell them. So because he was able to come through to me, he came through. But he came through in, you know, somewhat of the same way. He's like, forgive me because I'm in hell.
You know, I find it so funny that even on the other side, we can still be looking outside of ourselves for the answers.
I think there's almost a personality self that still stays. It's really kind of shedding that personality self to go into more of a spiritual self. And maybe that's part of the reason we also are connecting with the personality. But we can connect, all of us can connect with those who have passed and have an influence on their progress as much as those there can help to put things into our path. But again, as Beth said, it's our free choice. It's like what we do with what we are given or those experiences is our choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes, I think you touched on it, Nicole, in the beginning, was so much. Sometimes our biggest growth comes when we go through challenges and adversarial situations and darkness. But we always, there is light. There's always light. There's always, we just, to keep that in our mind, that there is always a way forward. There's always possibilities. And even if people are experiencing all that is happening on this earth, and there's so much, there's one letter that was profound that we included that was called Loving Beyond the Chaos. It was a letter that was channeled by a group of passengers that passed in a plane crash. And it was interesting because I see groups on my left side. There's so many people waiting to talk that we've established almost like a deli ticketing machine. Everyone gets a number. We're going to talk to everybody, but if everybody talks at the same time, we can't process it. We're overloaded, and we still have to live here and do what we need to do in our earthly lives. So everyone gets a number.
We tried to get them to help us wash the dishes, but
no one's helping wash the dishes. But the thing that was so unusual with this situation, I said to Beth, you know, usually it's like, you know, individuals with numbers. There was this whole group standing on my left stage. They all had the number 1, and they moved collectively center stage. And I knew this letter was coming. And it's a very, what would you say, Beth? It's very direct. It's in very plain terms about the chaos that's happening, the darkness that's happening in our world today.
But the letter spoke about the light, that, you know, to look for the light, you know, when you have chaos, there's always light afterward. Look for the people who are helping, look for the helpers. Instead of focusing on all the chaos, focus on the light and focus on,
and you see people, I mean, with every difficult situation, with every trauma, you see people rising with compassion and love and doing different things for one another. It's in those moments that we need to grow those moments, that we need to put the energy into that area so that that light overcomes the darkness, because darkness can't exist in the light. But so much is bubbling up. We live in extraordinary times. So much is bubbling up to the surface now. And it's that darkness that's been repressed, right, that we're bringing up, and we're opening up. We're opening up who we are. We're opening up what we're about. We're breaking down a lot of the conditioning of our society, social conditioning, so religious, political. So many things are happening that it seems chaos, but it's in that chaos where there is this rebirth. And as Beth said, to look for the light, to be the light, to choose, how am I going to respond to this? In what loving way am I going to respond to this, even for the difficult situation? Because we have the power to heal. We have the power to lift and to release that darkness and to lift us all, because we're all in this together.
One of the messages that's been coming through for me to share with my audience over the last 2 weeks or so is that in this world of duality, that it is only in the greater the darkness, the more ability it has to hold more light. So to always remember that, and that talks about our shadow journey, that we can't really discover in a dual world what the beauty and power of our light is until we go into the darkness. And so having that reminder, I think, brings a little bit of hope and peace when there is, like you said, so many chaos and darker events happening.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Beth.
Okay. Yes, Nicole, I've been thinking about that as well, even with my own journey. I would not be the person I am today, the compassionate person, the loving person, had I not been through the dark things that I have been through. And how can we really understand and know the light unless we have the darkness to compare it to? So I think there's a truth to that. I believe that as well.
Yeah, they say, you don't really know joy if you don't know sorrow. When we grieve, we've all lost loved ones. When we grieve deeply, it's because we love deeply. And you need that. It's almost like a teeter-totter. You need both sides, but with both sides, we can find the center too.
And also, I've come to understand that it's all for a purpose. It all makes sense in a bigger picture. We're all here individually and as a group to grow and to evolve. So these dark things that we've gone through as a whole, as a society, within ourselves, it's all for learning. And there are people that play roles for us. My biggest teachers are my biggest triggers. They're the ones who have taught me the most in life. And if I hadn't had them, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would not be sitting here today. And I wouldn't have the understanding that I have. So, when I hear people getting lost in the darkness or in fear, I see just life as a big stage, as a big play. And, we are the director sometimes, we're the main actor sometimes, or supporting cast sometimes. We're all helping each other. It's all for evolvement. And I don't, years ago, I could get lured into that fear. I don't feel that anymore because I feel that there's a bigger picture there.
That's very powerful. And we're very familiar on this side of the podcast with our triggers.
Yes, my triggers teach me much.
Yes.
I welcome them now. They're like, I call them golden nuggets.
Yes. I remember a spiritual teacher saying one time, one day you're going to run towards your triggers. And I thought, no way, I'm not going to do that. And sure enough, that's what I want now. I want the triggers because I know there's a healing there that's going to happen.
Well, before we end the show, I wanted to ask you ladies if there was ever a letter that was written and given to someone who really wasn't a believer on the other side kind of stuff, and that really shifted their belief system.
Okay, so my husband, the first one that came to mind. He loves me and he supports me, but he is not a believer.
Come on, he heard a train whistle.
I know, but he heard it and he will deny it to this day. It doesn't.
Just like you, Brian.
It's very hard for him. And he's even had other spiritual experiences that have been incredible. He was walking our dog one day, and it was dark, and I said, be careful, it's dark out. And he came back and he looked like he had seen a ghost. And I was like, well, what happened? He said, a car came around the corner very quickly, and I could swear the car went through me. I mean, that is a crazy experience. And then, in a week, he denies, it all happens. But a letter did come through for him about change. And I showed it to him, and he read it, and he was quiet about it. And then he went off on his day, and then he called me up and he said, you're not going to believe this, but someone just sent me a cartoon character, and there's a caterpillar sitting on one side and a butterfly sitting on the other. And the caterpillar says, you've changed. And the butterfly says, I know, we're supposed to. And he said, how did this come through today? Just after I read that letter. So it's hard for him. He's got his conditioning, and but he has started to open. He started to open from the messages that come through, and I catch him reading the book, quietly in the bathroom.
Like a kid who's eating the cookies out of the cookie jar. He's like hiding in the corner reading the book.
Yeah. It's like he won't admit it, but yeah, I believe it's affecting him.
Oh.
And I think that once we change, we're affecting people around us, even if we're not having those conversations. Mm-hmm. We're opening them up just because our energy has changed, and our energy is affecting everyone else. Mm-hmm. So I've seen changes in him, even aside from direct conversations that we've had.
Well, our very own Brian is a result of that being on our show.
True. Tell your husband to read The Miracle Morning.
The Miracle Morning? Okay.
But I do think that each of the letters, Nicole, resonates differently with people, whether they were the recipient of the letter or the feedback that we're getting from readers to our book, as different letters, depending on what's going on in people's lives, touches them, some or affect them more than other letters. So there's just that full collection. There's something in it for each person. The other thing that we're hearing too is some people have gone back and reread. There's so many layers of knowingness, of insight and inspiration in these letters, that they're getting them at different times. And once they've gone through another kind of experience, they're like, oh my gosh, aha, now I understand this a little bit more, or this is helping me really connect with myself, which connects with all of us. We're all looking for that connection. So it's interesting how the feedback has been very positive, but also helping each person to wherever they are on their own journey, which is perfect. We're all exactly where we need to be, and just to be. I think that's the other message.
And sometimes, like Berit said, things open up over time. We did a reading for a woman, and there was a lot of scenes, that related to her being in a bar with her father, and and I had said, he's concerned about this, and I'm just relaying this to you. It came through enough that we felt that we needed to let her know. And she said, well, I don't think that really applies to me. I don't understand that. And then maybe 3 sentences later, she said, well, I do get a lot of stomach aches when I drink a lot. and then she said, I think I drink the most out of everybody in my family. So I think people hear it when they're ready,
Sure.
Oh yeah. Your own timing is everything for your journey,
Yeah. And that's why we wanted to put the book out there, so people can let it unfold for them. It's a little different than doing a reading for someone where we get all this powerful information for them, but they have the book. We've had people read through it one letter at a time, or, they'll breeze through it and see what letter jumps out at them. And, I'm sure you've experienced this with your own journey, that you might read something and it doesn't resonate with you. And then, a year later you pick it up and you're like, now is the time I should be reading this. And now all of a sudden everything makes sense, and you realize, what it all meant. So the reason we wanted to do the book was so people, can go at their own pace and have that information if they want.
And we hear there's 7 books. That's what our guides have told us. So we will be starting to, this year, put together the 2nd book, which I think what we're getting from our guides, and Beth, you might want to talk about Louise a little bit, but we have some mentors in the spiritual realm who have given us everything from the 3 parts to the book, as well as who's coming through. But they also are speaking to the 2nd book. I think the first one is really focused on the individual healing. The 2nd one is focused on the world healing. So it's interesting how the letters, we have so many, but they so perfectly come together to sort of support the thesis of whatever the next book is. So stay tuned.
Ladies, thanks so much for coming on the show. Did you want to let our audience know where they can find your book and your information?
Yes, our book is available on Amazon. So if they go to Amazon and they can look up the Living Beyond Fear, Sacred Letters from the Afterlife. We also have a website, which is www.thesacredletters.com. So sacred letters with an S.com. And on there has all the information about us and about our journey. And they can also get the book through our website.
Thank you. Oh, what a great talk today. Really appreciate having you ladies on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, we really appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
Thanks for all the work that you do. I mean, it's so soothing, I'm sure, for people, especially who've had loved ones pass, to be able to receive a letter from them. I just can't imagine how impactful that would be on your grief.
Yeah, we'll have to check out your book.
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again to our audience for tuning in once again. We will be back with you next week.
Thank you all for joining our show. We appreciate you tuning in and supporting us. If you have any questions you would like answered on the show or any guests you would like to hear on our show, please email that information to us at info@enlightenup.us. And please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you're interested in contacting Nicole or myself for some coaching or any of the other services we provide, you can find out more about Nicole at inflexibleme.com, and my website is lisaloveslove.com. Thank you again for joining us and supporting our show, and we will be back with you all next week.